Have you ever been so drawn to someone that it felt like gravity, like some invisible force was pulling you toward her, even when your mind knew better? Even when every red flag was waving, every part of your logic was screaming, "Stop!" But you couldn't. You didn't, because something deeper had already decided for you, something ancient, something unconscious. And here's the truth that no one ever tells you. You weren't falling in love with her. You were falling in love with your own reflection. Not the kind you see in the mirror, but the one you've buried in the shadows of your psyche. The one Carl Jung called the Anima, your inner feminine, your soul's secret face, the part of you you've never dared to meet. When Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate," this is exactly what he meant. That woman you can't get out of your head, she's not just a person, she's a projection, a mirror, a living embodiment of your unmet self. Let's get brutally honest. Most men aren't falling in love. They're falling into projection. You see a woman and something about her shakes your soul. It's not rational, it's not measured, it's a surge. You think she sees you. You think she understands you like no one else ever has. You think this is destiny. But what you don't see is that you're being pulled by a force that lives inside of you. Not her. You've projected your anima onto her like a film on a blank screen, and now you're worshipping the screen as if it were divine. This is how men become enslaved, not by her body, not by her words, but by the fantasy you stitched onto her soul without even realizing it. And here's where the pain comes in. Because fantasies always collapse, reality always returns, and when it does, you feel betrayed, you feel abandoned, you wonder what changed, but the truth is, nothing changed except your illusion. That high you felt, that obsession, that burning desire, it wasn't love, it was your own unconscious crying out to be seen, using her as a vessel. Jung called the anima the bridge to the unconscious, the feminine face of your own soul. She shows up in dreams, in symbols, in art, and most powerfully in women who trigger something unspeakable in you. She can appear as the muse, the one who inspires your greatness, the siren, the one who intoxicates you with chaos, the savior, the one who seems to understand your deepest wounds. And in each form, she doesn't reflect the woman in front of you. She reflects the parts of you you've never integrated. This is why love can feel like madness, why you can't stop thinking about her, why your whole life starts to orbit around her presence or her absence. But she isn't doing this to you, you are. Let's go even deeper. The first woman every man ever loved was his mother. And that relationship, whether nourishing or wounding, becomes the blueprint for every intimate bond that follows. If you felt emotionally abandoned by your mother, you might chase women who feel distant, cold, hard to reach. Not because you want to suffer, but because you're unconsciously trying to rewrite the past, to finally win the love you never received, to feel whole again. But here's the tragedy. The more you chase that wholeness through someone else, the more fragmented you become. You're not just dating women, you're reenacting unresolved trauma. You're projecting an archetype onto flesh and blood, and then blaming the woman when she fails to fulfill a role she never agreed to play. You think she changed, but really your projection started to crack, and instead of looking inward, you lash outward. You chase, you beg, you spiral, because the fantasy is dying, and with it, your illusion of salvation. This is what Jung meant when he said the anima can become a tyrant. When she's not integrated, she doesn't guide, you get possessed. She rules from the shadows, pulling your strings, using women as avatars to communicate with you. And this is why some women seem to have a spell over you. It's not them. It's you. It's the unconscious longing inside of you, longing for union, for meaning, for connection to your own soul. But until you recognize that, you'll keep trying to find yourself in someone else. And every time, you'll lose a little more of who you really are. So, how do you break the spell? You stop chasing her, and you start listening to what she represents. Because here's the paradox. The moment you stop seeking the anima in other women is the moment she finally appears to you from within. That's where the real relationship begins, not with a woman outside of you, but with the feminine soul within you. This is the path of individuation, of reclaiming your soul, of becoming whole. Not through seduction, not through mastery of tactics, not through endless emotional roller coasters, but through inner alchemy. Through integrating the very parts of yourself you've projected, rejected, and misunderstood. When you begin this journey, you'll feel the withdrawal like a detox. The silence will hurt, the emptiness will ache, but stay with it. Because on the other side of that void is a version of you that no longer needs her to feel complete, that no longer mistakes pain for passion, that no longer confuses projection for love. Because here's the truth you've been avoiding your whole life. The woman you're addicted to doesn't exist. She never did. She was a mirror, a message, a manifestation of the self you abandoned long ago. And now it's time to come home. But when you finally start to withdraw your projection, the world doesn't applaud you. It punishes you. The silence gets louder, the fantasies scream louder, and the temptation to go back, to call her, to message her, to chase the ghost, is overwhelming, because it's not just about her, it's about what she represented. Hope, rescue, completion. But the anima is not here to complete you, she's here to reveal what's incomplete. And that's the wound most men refuse to face. You've built your sense of self around being chosen, being needed, being desired. And when that desire fades, when the illusion dies, you feel like you've lost something sacred, but what you've really lost is the distraction from your own inner emptiness. Carl Jung didn't teach self-repression, he didn't preach celibacy or disconnection. What he taught was depth, the courage to look into your own soul and face what you've spent a lifetime avoiding, because the anima, when left unconscious, binds you to dependency. But when integrated, she becomes your guide. This is the turning point. The woman is gone, the obsession is fading, and now there's only you and the part of you you've never dared to meet, your softness, your vulnerability, your ache for meaning, not just sexually, not just emotionally, but spiritually. You don't just want a girlfriend, you want wholeness, you want to feel seen. And somewhere along the way you confused her attention for your salvation. But here's what no one tells you. She can't save you, she never could, because she was never carrying your soul, she was only reflecting it. Think about the women who've haunted you, the ones you couldn't let go of, the ones you swore were different. Did they love you? Maybe. Did they understand you? Perhaps. But what's more important is what they awakened in you. A longing so profound it felt cosmic. But that longing is not for her. It's for integration, for inner union, for the sacred marriage between your conscious self and your unconscious feminine. And that's not something she can give you. That's your work, your path, your responsibility. When you stop externalizing the anima, your entire emotional landscape begins to shift. You no longer chase, you no longer beg, you no longer compromise your dignity just to feel close to someone who doesn't even know the real you. Because now you know that what you were seeking in her was never hers to give, it was yours to reclaim. This is where individuation begins, not with theories, not with abstract insight, but with heartbreak, with grief, with the shattering of illusions. Jung never said this journey would be easy, he said it would be necessary. He said it would require everything. The death of your false self, the burning away of projections, the willingness to sit in the fire of your own unhealed wounds and not run. Because what waits on the other side is not just healing, it's transformation. Let's be clear, this isn't about demonizing women, it's about taking back your projections. It's about recognizing that the pain you blamed on her was always pointing to something deeper, something unresolved, something buried in your psyche long before you ever met her. This is where many men stop. They don't want to look that deep. They'd rather stay angry, blame her, say all women are the problem. But that's not strength. That's spiritual cowardice. Because the anima, when ignored, becomes your tormentor. But when embraced, she becomes your compass. She doesn't want to dominate you. She wants to wake you up. She wants to remind you of your wholeness, to show you the parts of your soul that have been buried beneath ego, performance, and emotional repression, and she will keep appearing in the faces of different women until you finally listen. Until you stop confusing projection with passion, until you stop calling chaos chemistry, until you stop worshipping a fantasy and start integrating your own feminine essence. The truth is, the woman you lost was never yours. She was never meant to be, because what you were actually losing was a piece of yourself that you had given away unconsciously. Now you have the chance to call it back, to sit with your inner feminine, to let her speak to you in silence, in dreams, in tears you've never allowed yourself to cry. This is the sacred work, the kind of work that doesn't show up on dating advice channels or social media feeds, the kind that doesn't earn applause, but earns your soul back. When Jung spoke of the anima, he wasn't giving men an excuse to avoid women. He was giving them a roadmap to reclaim their own depth, to find in themselves the qualities they so desperately seek outside: intuition, emotional wisdom, compassion, softness, receptivity. These are not weaknesses. These are not threats to your masculinity. They are your balance. They are the missing half. And when you reclaim them, something radical happens. You stop chasing women who reflect your wounds. You stop being seduced by emotional chaos. You stop confusing drama for desire. And you start choosing differently. You start seeing women not as saviors or enemies, but as mirrors. Some still reflecting your shadow, others reflecting your growth. But either way, you no longer get lost in them, because you've come home to yourself. This is where power begins: quiet, grounded, soulful power. The kind that doesn't need to control or conquer. The kind that radiates wholeness. That attracts not through performance, but through presence. And when that presence is real, when you've met and integrated your own anima, you no longer fear losing anyone, because no one can take from you what you've found within. This is the moment you begin to understand what Jung meant by individuation, not just becoming whole, but becoming conscious, becoming someone who no longer looks for himself in the eyes of someone else, but in the depths of his own silence. And that silence, at first it's brutal. It feels like death, because in many ways it is. The death of who you thought you were, the death of the illusion that love is out there waiting to save you. But from that death, something else is born, something unshakable. You begin to feel the subtle shift. The urge to chase begins to fade. You stop checking your phone, hoping she'll reach out. You stop replaying the story in your head, wondering what you could have said, what you should have done. That noise, it starts to dissolve, not because you forced yourself to forget her, but because the part of you that was addicted to her has started to come home. This is what healing looks like. Not forgetting, not hardening, but remembering who you were before the projection, before the fantasy, before the emotional enslavement that masqueraded as love. You begin to look at women differently. You notice the difference between attraction and possession, between desire and dependency. You stop looking for a high, you start looking for resonance. You stop falling for the woman who plays out your mother wound. You start seeing the woman who stands as she is, not as who you want her to be. But to get there, you had to suffer. You had to walk through the fire of your own illusion. You had to lose her and lose yourself. And that loss wasn't a mistake, it was a message. It was your unconscious demanding to be known. Jung taught that what we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. You thought she was fate, that this heartbreak was some cruel cosmic joke, but she was your mirror. She came to show you what was hidden. She came to trigger what you had buried. She came to carry your soul in disguise until you were ready to hold it yourself. This is the hardest part to accept, that love, the kind you thought you had, was actually a mirror of your fragmentation. That the obsession, the longing, the intensity, that wasn't about her. That was about you. And now you're finally seeing it. You're finally seeing her not as the villain or the angel, but as the messenger. And you're not angry anymore. You're not worshipping her either. You're simply present, aware, grateful maybe, because without her, you might have never found the door back to your own soul. But this isn't the end. This is where the real work begins, because now that you've reclaimed your anima, you have to relate to her. You have to learn to speak her language, not through women, but through you, through your intuition, through your dreams, through the subtle emotional currents you used to ignore or dismiss as weakness. You start asking yourself deeper questions. What am I feeling and why? What does this dream mean? Why did that image disturb me so much? What is my soul trying to say that my ego doesn't want to hear? These questions aren't romantic, they're archetypal, and the answers, they don't always come quickly, but when they do, they come with a kind of clarity that cuts through noise like a blade. You begin to dream of her differently. Not the woman you chased, but the anima. Maybe she shows up in symbolic form. Maybe she appears as a guide, a child, a shadow. Maybe you don't see her at all, but you feel her. And slowly the lines between you and her begin to blur. You start to understand the feminine within you, her rage, her beauty, her longing, her grace. And instead of trying to find her in someone else, you meet her in your own psyche, in your art, in your silence, in your pain. This is the path of the conscious man, the one who no longer uses women as emotional crutches or spiritual placeholders, the one who has stopped blaming women for his unhealed wounds, the one who now honors them, not for what they can give him, but for what they reflect. And here's the paradox. The more you integrate the anima, the less you need her outside of you. But when she does appear, in a woman who has done her own shadow work, her own inner integration, you recognize her not with obsession, but with reverence. Because now you see clearly. You know the difference between infatuation and alignment, between emotional hunger and soulful connection. You no longer need her to be perfect. You just need her to be real, because you are finally real. And that changes everything. You become magnetic, not because of tactics or charm, but because you radiate wholeness. You listen differently, you speak differently. You no longer posture or perform, you simply show up. And in that presence, people feel something rare. They feel depth. They feel safety. They feel soul. This is the man Jung envisioned when he spoke of individuation, not a man who has conquered the world, but one who has made peace with his inner kingdom, a man who can feel deeply without drowning, who can love without losing himself, who can walk away not because he's cold, but because he's whole. And yet, this wholeness is not the end, it's the beginning, because now, for the first time, you're capable of real love, not projection, not dependency, but love that sees the other as they are, not as what you need them to be. You stop choosing based on wounds, you start choosing based on resonance. You stop chasing intensity, you start cultivating intimacy. You stop performing, you start being. And she, the woman who may come next, she won't be your salvation. She'll be your reflection, not of your brokenness, but of your integration. And together, if she has done her work and you have done yours, you won't complete each other. You'll expand each other. You'll co-create a space where both your inner feminine and her inner masculine are welcome. That is sacred love. But it starts with the death of the illusion, the death of the fantasy, the death of the woman you thought you needed to be whole, and the birth of something much more powerful, your own soul. By now you understand the cost of projection, the emotional slavery, the endless loop of hope and disappointment, the way you handed over your sovereignty for a feeling. But now it's time to claim something else, your inner authority. Because the Anima, once reclaimed, doesn't just soothe your pain, she becomes your creative force, your intuition, your spiritual center. The very energy that once drove you to obsession now drives you to expression. You begin to write again, you paint, you sit in silence and hear things you once drowned out with distraction. Your dreams become more vivid, more meaningful. You start to feel connected, not just to women, but to life itself. And that's because the Anima is not just about romance, she's about soul. This is what most men don't realize. The journey they thought was about women was never about women. It was about the inner feminine, the ability to feel, to surrender, to create, to intuit. These are not feminine in the gendered sense. They are feminine in the archetypal sense. And every man carries them, buried beneath layers of armor and performance. The world doesn't teach you to honor these parts. It teaches you to suppress them, to mock them, to replace feeling with force, softness with stoicism, depth with dominance. But Jung warned us. What we reject in ourselves becomes our shadow, and the unintegrated feminine becomes your greatest saboteur. So instead of being ruled by her, you integrate her, you make space for her. You let her speak through your instincts, your visions, your emotional truths, and that makes you powerful in a way most men will never understand. Because this power isn't loud, it doesn't need to dominate, it doesn't seek validation, it simply is. And in its presence, people feel something different. They feel a man who cannot be seduced by illusion, a man who has already met the goddess within, and therefore does not need to worship her outside of himself. This doesn't make you unreachable, it makes you clear. You can still love, still desire, still be moved by beauty, but you are no longer hijacked by it. You no longer lose yourself in it, because now you know the source. And when that realization sinks in, everything changes, not just your relationships, but your choices, your voice, your vision for your life. Because a man who has integrated his anima is no longer led by unconscious hunger. He is led by inner alignment. He becomes unpredictable in the best way, not reactive, but intuitive. He doesn't move based on fear or loneliness, he moves based on soul, and when he speaks from a place that most people have never touched. That's why his words land differently, that's why his presence is felt even in silence. This is emotional sovereignty, not because you've closed yourself off, but because you've opened yourself to the parts of you that once felt too soft, too chaotic, too unfamiliar. And now they are your strength. You no longer fear the feminine, you revere her. You understand her many faces, both within and without, the muse, the destroyer, the guide, the child, the lover. And you no longer confuse her chaos with cruelty, her emotion with weakness. You understand the language she speaks. You've lived in her world, and now you carry that wisdom everywhere you go. This is where the boy becomes the man, not through conquest, but through communion with himself, with the unconscious, with the deeper currents of existence that most men never dare to feel. And in that communion you find clarity, you find peace, you find the end of the search. Because you're no longer looking for someone to reflect back to you what you refuse to claim. You claimed it, and so when love arrives, and it will, it finds you already full, already whole, already sovereign. That's what makes you dangerous in the best sense. You're no longer seducible by fantasy. You no longer chase the woman who mirrors your wounds. You attract the woman who mirrors your depth. And because you faced your anima, you recognize when she's unconscious in someone else. You no longer fall for the siren song. You see the projection at work. You see the play unfolding, and you choose presence instead of performance, groundedness instead of grasping, wholeness instead of hunger. This doesn't mean you'll never be triggered. It means you'll know what to do with the trigger. You'll pause. You'll observe. You'll ask, what is this emotion pointing me toward inside myself? That question changes everything, because you stop asking what she thinks, what she feels, what she wants, and you start asking, what am I learning? What part of me is still waiting to be loved, not by her, but by me? And in that self-love, not the Instagram version, but the gritty, vulnerable, inner knowing kind, you become untouchable. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built roots. The anima, when integrated, grounds you in the deepest part of your being. She makes you sensitive without being reactive, open without being naive, soft without being weak. She makes you see. And once you see, truly see, you can't go back. You can't unsee the illusion. You can't reattach to the fantasy. You can't pretend she was ever the answer. Because now you know. She was the door, the reflection, the invitation. But the real journey was always inward. So what do you do now? You live. You create. You walk as a man who has met the goddess and did not run. You become the mirror that others don't want to face, and the presence they never forget, because you've done what most never will. You've reclaimed the anima. And now, the woman you once ached for fades into memory. Not because she didn't matter, but because she fulfilled her role. She woke you up. And in doing so, she gave you the greatest gift of all, yourself. This is the revelation that humbles you, that grounds you, that changes the way you move through the world. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you've finally surrendered to something deeper. The need to be whole, not to be held. To be seen by yourself, not just by others. To stop negotiating your worth through someone else's affection. Because now you see the cost of that game. Every time you made her the sun around which you revolved, you disappeared. Every time you made her the meaning, you lost yours. And every time you begged for her attention, what you were really begging for was your anima's return. But she was never outside of you. She was waiting, patiently, beneath the ache, beneath the story, beneath the persona you crafted to survive. Now she speaks in a different tone, not through obsession, but through intuition, not through infatuation, but through inspiration. She guides you, not to another woman, but to the next version of yourself. You become a man of soul, a man with depth, the kind of man who can hold space for the chaos of life without crumbling, the kind who doesn't just survive heartbreak, but transforms through it. And when others come to you, confused by their own pain, lost in the illusion of romantic salvation, you'll know how to listen, not with pity, not with superiority, but with truth, because you've walked through the fire, and you know what waits on the other side. Not bitterness, not numbness, but integration, and integration is the path to freedom. The anima, once healed, doesn't just stop tormenting you, she starts co-creating with you. You stop writing poetry about her and start writing with her. You stop building fantasies and start building a life. One that doesn't revolve around being chosen, one that doesn't hinge on keeping someone's attention, one that is rooted in self-knowing, emotional maturity, and spiritual alignment. You start making choices from clarity, not craving. You no longer chase highs, you cultivate peace. You no longer worship intensity, you honor intimacy. And when the next woman enters your life, she'll meet someone different. Not a boy looking for his mother, not a man looking to be saved, but a soul looking to share, not take. You'll no longer confuse chemistry with compatibility. You'll feel when projection starts and you'll take it back. You'll own your wounds. You'll know how to hold your boundaries without building walls. You'll know how to feel deeply without drowning. Because you are no longer at war with your own feminine. You've made peace. And from that peace, love becomes something else entirely. It becomes sacred. It becomes shared. It becomes real. But the truth is, even if love never comes in the form you expect, you are no longer waiting. You're not in limbo. You're not trapped in the hope that someone will rescue you from your loneliness. Because you've befriended your solitude. You've made a home out of your silence. You've stopped outsourcing your worth. And that changes everything. So now, as this chapter closes, ask yourself, who have I been projecting onto others? What am I still unwilling to feel inside myself? Where am I still waiting for someone to love a part of me I haven't yet accepted? These are the questions that break the spell. These are the questions that make you dangerous, not to women, not to the world, but to the illusions that once ruled your life. You were never addicted to her. You were addicted to the version of yourself you thought you could only meet through her. But you've met him now, and from here on out everything is different. Because you finally see the truth. The woman you were addicted to doesn't exist. But the man you've become because of her does. And he's not looking to be saved. He's already whole,